good morning, everyone. I want to ask, as we do all the time, if there are questions from our last session or if there are questions about anything that you want to bring up at this moment. Okay. Let me ask this then. Are there any questions? Is there anything that you've heard in the news or discussed by anyone that you would like to bring up?
Sage, could you speak up a little bit, please?
Okay. I said, are there any questions pertaining to something that you heard or read in the news that you would like to bring up? Okay. This morning, I want to see if we can look at where we are again in terms of things being turned upside down. But first, Ron, Ron has a
Yes,
question.
sir.
Would you speak what you say what you had about Enoch, what you've seen before I get into this other?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was this kind of came to me, and if you don't mind, I'll use you as an example, and see if this makes sense. If knowing your life, let's say 40 years ago, James Richard was very active in what he did in the earth. He was an activist. He was a lecturer. He was an organizer. In a way, an agitator, a husband, a father, a brother, and all those things were very active, and a lot of them still are. Some, especially the family things, still are, of course. However, the James Richard that you know today is different than that James Richard 40 years ago. So what happened? The James Richard 40 years ago had a different agenda. His mind was different, and he was doing what was right for James Richard at the time. But as he had journeyed into his spiritual process, his transformation took a hold of him, and his walk turned completely to Elohim's walk. And when his walk changed to Elohim's walk, that transformation changed him into Elohim. So his will was no longer that of the activist and the agitator and the organizer. All those things, all that energy changed over into the will of Elohim. So when it talks about and he walked with God, it's not just talking about his journey, it's talking about a transformation of a man. So whereas I had always thought that what Enoch had done was almost selfish, because I wondered why he didn't stick around if he knew God as well as he did and not help others. But I see it differently now. I see it as a transformation of him being Elohim in the earth. So that's about it in a nutshell.
Any questions about that comment, or can you see what Ron is saying?
Why he said again why it was selfish?
Ron?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Why did you say he was selfish?
Not selfish in a self. He was human, and he did the thing that humans do. His pursuit of truth had to do more with who he was and who looking at his race, whereas he did not do what he was doing for mankind because he did not understand who he was at the time. He understood what he saw, and the truth he walked in was not bad because he was doing fighting against oppression. But when he saw who he was, it changed his whole outlook on life, and that will that he had, and changed his pursuit totally. And it wasn't. It's a lifelong journey. It's a transformation. So I didn't mean it as selfish as in doing what he does, but it can be. That can be the journey for any of us. Any of us took that same path. We had to travel our own way, but each and every one of us had to make that transformation into from not being Enoch, from not being Kathy, from not being James, from not being Ron or John or whoever. We transformed and released our will and became Elohim as we walked with him.
Ron, this is Mary. I had a thought, and you tell me if you think this is the same. Remember, they had the footsteps in the sand, and it was two, and then they became one. And then in that capture, it says that is when I carried you. But I said a difference. That is when I recognized who I was, and now I'm one with the Creator. Could that be described the same way?
Very same thing, Mary. Very same thing. That's what I mean. And it was just eye opener to me because I had never seen it that way. It was just kind of like I said, when I saw, I thought he was. To me, I thought what it was saying was, I saw who God was, and I wanted to leave here. Instead of helping other people to see who God is, I was selfish in what I saw, and I wanted to leave here. That's what I thought it was saying. I thought Enoch was selfish, and until I see it now a bit differently.
Questions, anyone? Comments?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I too, Ron, was always concerned about why would Enoch do that, and my conclusion was that he became so much a part of the light, or one with the light, to the extent that he could no longer exist in that body. But now that I'm hearing what you're saying and looking at it in the way that we have begun to be shown what's in the scriptures, and that makes more sense to me than him just being taken completely out of the earth. And when it says that he was no more,
Correct.
as opposed to saying he went to live with the Father, as they said about I think it was Moses when he was on the backside of the mountain and gave up the ghost. So that does make more sense to me.
Okay.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm going to tell you something else it says, too. It names the descendants of Enoch. So I think that's interesting in regards to what you just said. When you name his descendants, I think that's not only descendants, but also I think it is direct route to a spreading of the understanding that Enoch had. For example, when Abraham was at an age where he was going to transition, he sent all his sons away into the various countries and to actually teach the gifts that he had given them, and they were spiritual gifts. And the same thing, I believe, also happened with Enoch when he was no more, because he had gotten caught up and become one, as Mary said, with the Creator, and he was no more. He was no more because he was not the same anymore. In search of, now he had been apprehended by the very thing that he was searching for. Questions, comments?
That makes sense, Pastor. And at some point, whether we look at it from the Old Testament or New Testament perspective, those names, when it goes down that lineage and says, and this one we got that one, that shows us the difficulties and the adjustments and the desires of the journey. Because we look at those and you see that some of those names meant that things happen that, when we think about, I give my life to God and we're trying to get like the people of the Bible, this was easy, that was easy, everything's full. No, it takes you in a different way through things, and some of the things that you suffer through is what brings you to truth. Like, for example, no one wants to talk about that the Savior of the world came through the womb of bitterness and rebellion, but that's what Mary means. So when you look at it that way and study those names, you will see that all of it is put together. You have to look at the totality of it in order to see balance, because if not, you kind of get lost in it and you don't see the meaning or the strength and the power behind what those names mean when you pull them together.
If you look at the birth of Jesus coming from the womb of bitterness and rebellion, it all makes sense, because the world was in a state of rebellion and full of bitterness towards the occupiers. And the priests were rebelling against everything that they were supposed to have been teaching or living. And because of that, Jesus was brought into the earth to give men guidance, so that the journey through, so that their journey rather would lead us away from bitterness and hatred, bitterness and rebellion. Because the rebellion was that we're speaking of was the rebellion against the Creator. Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Anyone else?
I change your subject a little bit, and something you and I mentioned before. This Roe v. Wade thing, Pastor, it really has the land agitated. And so much so, I don't recall in quite a while seeing this many people with this kind of reaction to something. So I know you want to talk about the act itself, what that means, but the reaction to it, I guess, was a little surprising to me.
Some time ago, I think I did make a statement about my desire was that they would overturn it. And the reason for that was because I felt like it would be an eye-opener for suburban women, in particular white women, and it would throw a wrench into the plans of the Republican Party because they they never intended for Roe to be overturned. That was their go-to to make sure that they kept the evangelicals in line. And if you read the history of the abortion in the evangelical movement, you will find that what's the name of it? Thomas Rose Baptist Church. What's his name? Jerry Falwell colluded with the leaders of the Republican Party to find an issue that would bring them and hold them into the Republican Party, and that was the issue. The abortion issue, and it sustained itself. The difference between the Republican Party and Democrat Party is that Republicans have think tanks where they bring up issues and give names to them that's totally contrary to what they are. The right to life movement as opposed to pro-choice. If you look at the names that they give to things, the right to work in right to work states, meaning that you don't have a right to work really if you're in a union. So, but Democrats didn't do that, and as a result of that, the Republicans have always ran the government. It does not matter who the president is. The Republicans always runs the government. Newt Gingrich ran it with Clinton, and with Bush, of course, the Republican Party ran it. With Obama, the Republican Party ran it, and with Trump and with Biden, still ran it. No matter who the president is, the Republicans have always ran the country. And when I say the Republicans, I'm talking about ignorant Republican white women and old dusty slave attitude white men have always ran the country. And right now they don't know what to do with themselves because it got overturned. The rethinking of it is at hand now. You can cool believe that the moment that they found out it was overturned, they went into a think tank to spin this thing in their favor. Now, what about abortion itself? Well, let me back up. Ron, does that address what you were raising?
Yeah, because I did want to know the political history of this, why this thing is powerful as it is.
Well, it goes back even further than that. In 1856, well, prior to 1856, abortion was legal in this country. Nobody paid it any attention, really. And in 1856, the AMA, American Medical Association, was organized. The following year, in 1857, a doctor named Horatio Storer joined the AMA. He had been railing against midwifery. Midwifery. That it? Midwifery. Anyway, because they were the ones who were delivering the babies, especially African women were delivering babies. He was an obstetrician, and he had begun to study gynecology. And he began to say that the women, the midwives were driving doctors out of business because doctors should be getting paid to deliver babies, while the midwives doing it for nothing, really. And in particular, he was railing against black women who were doing it because, of course, there were white women also who were delivering babies. So he joined, in 1857, he joined the AMA. And that was his key issue, to stop African women from delivering babies. And one of the things he said was, white women, spread your loins all across the country. That was a dog whistle. And the dog whistle was this, because it had not been a dog whistle prior to. He just said what he meant. And what he was saying is, there are black kids being born at a higher rate than white kids. And we are going to be overran by white folks, by Chinese and Japanese, because he did include the Chinese and Japanese in it. There was something called the Page Act that was passed to keep Chinese women from immigrating into this country, and that was primarily dealing with the Chinese on the West Coast and the Japanese, of course. So throughout history, abortion has always been a political issue, and the politics of it has always been the same. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with a baby's life. It has everything to do with keeping white women from aborting babies. It has everything to do with that. When the statisticians began to talk about how people of color in 25 years began to outnumber the number of Caucasians in this country, this abortion fight picked up. And the Republicans were behind the scenes making plans to get judges in place. And they started with the federal judges in the federal districts. And once they got set in the districts, that's when they went after the Supreme Court judges. And the judges on the Supreme Court, Republican judges have always been activist judges. But the Republicans call Democrats activist judges. And the Democrats bite every time. And they end up defending themselves as opposed to exposing what's actually happening. So here we are. We have judges on the bench who are there for quite some time, who are going to be making decisions that's going to throw the country into reverse. And everything that has transpired in terms of the rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution are going to be denied. One of the rights that's tied, well, there are several rights that's tied to Roe versus Wade. The foundation for Roe versus Wade was the right to contraceptives. The argument was in Connecticut, the right to contraceptives was denied, and it was carried before the Supreme Court. And that right was granted because no one had a right, excuse me, to your privacy in your bedroom in terms of contraceptives, and therefore no one had a right to determine whether or not a woman should have an abortion. That's her decision along with her doctor. That's the foundation of it. The foundation for the contraceptive also is the foundation for interracial marriages. Love versus the state of Virginia, when that case was decided, it was decided on the basis of privacy, having the right to marry who you choose. All of these are stacked on top of each other. The gay marriage is stacked on top of that also. So all of these things has the propensity to crumble simply because of Roe versus Wade. And the number of people who believe in what I just described, that all this should crumble, are there on the courts. Even the colored man who does not know who he is saying that we going after the rest of it. Well, the rest of it means that you can't marry that white woman you with, which is highly ignorant. So, excuse me, and if you think about it, if he were a Democrat and not a Republican, his wife would be in jail for what she did on January 6th, and he would be off the court. They would impeach him because of his connections and collusion with her. Any questions about that? Or does that further clarify the history of it?
Yes.
Question.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I yield. Go ahead.
No.
Well, this is Evelyn, and I'm just wondering. It looks like, and I know you'll tell me if I'm wrong. It looks like white men about to get their butt kicked because you said, well, statistics states that more white women get abortions than black women. Don't know how true it is, but it looks like they're about to get their butt kicked. Am I wrong?
Well, you're right. And what's happening is the ideology of the country is changing. And the way it changes is to expose what needs to be changed. The ideology of this country has always been white men rule. And like I said, regardless of who the president is, the Republicans and that attitude has always ruled. Before Republicans, during the Democrats during the Lincoln era were the ones who supported slavery up until Nixon did the Southern strategy. These men in the Democrat Party ran the country on that Southern strategy, and they became Republicans. They still run the country, always have. So yes, what's happening is an empire, as I said the other week, an empire is crumbling and a nation is rising. The only way that a nation can rise where an empire stands is for the empire to be destroyed. And the empire of America is being destroyed. The foundation of the empire is Christianity and racism. That's the foundation of this nation. The reason that abortion was so easily overturned by those people is because they made it a Christian issue. And they have quietly, behind the scenes, now it's become open that this is a white Christian nation. And that's the foundation upon which this empire has been constructed. And the reason I call it an empire is because everywhere this nation has gone with the Bible in one hand, it had a gun in the other hand. And the places where it went, equipped that way, were in places where people of color live. And what did they do? They went into Africa. They took all of the minerals, and they went into South America. They took all of the farmland. They went into Hawaii, and they did the same thing with a Bible and a gun. One African said that the white man comes to Africa with his Bible in his hand and tell you to close your eyes and let's pray. And when you open your eyes and pray, they have stolen everything you had while your eyes were closed. And of course, that's a metaphor. And that is the truth about wherever America has gone. The missionaries go in first, and the thieves come in afterwards. The missionaries soften people up, and the thieves come in and steal. That's been the pattern of this nation. And if you refuse, you get killed. If you were to read how America took over Iran, you will find that one of the people who were working with the CIA, who was key to the plot to overthrow Iran, decided he was not going to do it. And a CIA agent put a gun to his head and told him, either you do it, you and your family go die if you don't. And that's why he went through with the plot. So, again, this country has always been a thief, not in sheep clothes, a thief with a gun and the Bible. That's it. I hope that helps.
Well, isn't that the same as colonizing?
No.
No? Okay.
Between imperialism and colonizing is that the British were colonizers. the British would go into a nation and set up a government that was ran by by the British hierarchy. They would appoint ministers over each country, and there were white people in these offices. Imperialism is when you control the government that you set up, but they don't see you. They don't see your face, but you are in control of it. So America is an imperialist nation, and Britain is a colonizer, or was anyway. The British used to boast that the sun never sets on their flag because they had colonies all over the world. The British are the ones they colonized India, and in doing so, the Kushites who lived in India, those dark-skinned people who lived in India, were forced into a caste system, and to this day, that caste system still exists. And as a matter of fact, it was the British who separated Pakistan and India, so that friction between the two was set up by them. The imperialists went in and drew artificial lines in Africa in particular, and began to exploit their resources, but they put people who looked like the people there in charge of the government while they pulled the puppet strings from behind the scenes. Questions, comments?
Okay.
No.
Thank you. This is Mary again. If I remember my history correctly, America was colonized by the undesirables in England. Seemed like something like that. I know in Australia they sent the criminals there, but here were not the undesirables sent here to colonize Liam?
Well, you're right. Australia was a prison, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. was colonized by both people who were dead in England and people who were imprisoned in England. As a
Correct.
matter, Georgia was a prison colony, actually.
That's right.
Of Georgia were prisoners. The ones who came to the northeast were primarily debtors. They were sent here to colonize because they could not pay off their debts, and that is one of the reasons that in this country you cannot be put in jail because of a debt. Your credit can be bad, but you cannot be imprisoned because of a debt, because they were getting away from that. Because the ones who colonized were coming out of prison for being indebted to somebody. So you're right on target, Mary. And you can't expect to colonize with criminals, and if the seed is criminal, then the fruit is going to be criminal also. And they came here for quote-unquote religious freedom. And that's why it was built into the Constitution, separating church and state. That has never, ever been true. So that's an illusion. However, with the nation rising and the empire falling, that will become true.
The other, Pastor, if I may comment,
Yes.
the other side of that issue is that a lot of people who came along with the criminals and whatever, were second sons, meaning that if they had an elder brother, that brother would inherit everything in the family. So the second son really got nothing, and he had to make his own way. He had to either go be a priest in the church, or he had to go in the army, or a lot of them made the decision to come to the quote unquote new world to make their fortunes. So a lot of what they were about was any way possible that they could build wealth. Anyway,
You're right.
that's
And actually, since you brought that up, Audrey, South Carolina was heavily populated by second sons.
yes.
During the Civil War, they had a flag. for the second son.
Yeah, it wasn't, it's the South Carolina flag, isn't it? South Carolina flag is with the blue background with the Palmetto tree. And I think it used to have the hat that represented the second son, but I think they took the hat out later on or something like that.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
So that goes into all the rest of it then, and it kind of answers a question that says the root of this nation is based on the desire for wealth, and it has never been about God. It is always this land was established on selfishness and greed, and that's what's done in violence, and that's why we've always been violent. So that kind of this discussion just kind of airs all that, and now maybe a new beginning is being foundation for a new beginning is being established. So all the anger and rage that you see in the news right now, not only from abortion, but just people fed up with stuff, just the gun violence, the gas prices and the price gouging, and it just seems like a lot of stuff is being exposed now that's bringing out a lot of feelings and emotions, and all of that really has to do with the foundation of this nation. I'm through it. I'm just speaking out loud, just an observation, listening to what we're talking about.
I think it's a great observation. Why? Because it shows something. You know how you talk about, you say things like, well, you need to talk it out. You need to get it out your system. Everything going to come to light. What's hidden in the dark will come to light. All of that, what you're talking about, that's what's happening. Everything, light is being shedded on everything that needs to be changed. Also, when you give thought to it, you think about the Creator would go through any length to bring Cush back to his senses, to bring Cush to a place where Cush recognizes who it was created to be. That's what all of this is about. Can you see that?
Yes, I do see that. That is most frustrating, especially when you look at people, as you said about the Supreme Court Justice Thomas, and just our leadership period. It just seemed like a tough, an uphill battle, rather.
But it's agonizing, and it's more agonizing, at least to me anyway, knowing what's happening, and at this juncture, not being able to do anything about it. However, it must be done, or someone else is going to be agonized, or the nation, the country, or the world is going to be destroyed. I do not believe that the earth is going to end anymore. I do believe that either Cush is going to do it now or it's going to do it later. I don't know the history of anyone who became aware of who they are and saw it as being divine in relationship to what's taking place in this earth. Marcus Garvey wanted to separate. He recognized who we are in terms of being people of the land of Africa and being divinely created from the womb of the woman in Africa. But his was separation. He was Pan-Africanist nationalist. When you look at Malcolm X, he saw it as from through the eyes of a Muslim. And what he saw after having gone to Mecca was extrication of white folk from the earth was not the way to go. Unification and true integration was the answer to the problem. Martin Luther King saw it as being an economic and educational thing. None of them saw it as being Kush being brought across the river in great chains and will be left in the condition that it was in until it became aware of who it is. I will bring Kush back to me, says Elohim. I will bring them back to their senses. I will bring Kush to a place where it understands it's my likeness, it's my image and my likeness. And it must create a world in this physical place just like it is in the spiritual place. That has to happen. You've been given everything that you needed to do it, and you didn't do it. You stayed separate from other men. And when you went into nations, you taught them, but you didn't change them. You allowed the Greeks and the Romans to steal everything without having changed their demeanor. Now it's time for you to do it. You can't do it with books, and you can't do it with speeches. You have to do it within yourself. And doing it within yourself means that you have to come to a realization and totally embrace the essence of your being. And when you do that, you will have discussions with each other that unfold everything that I have taught you, everything I've shown you, and everything that needs to be changed. You will begin to see that the brutality of the Caucasian is not to be assigned to any one person. The brutality of the Caucasian is a representation of dysfunctionality. And until you bring it to a state of functionality, you will remain in the state that you are in. You will be a servant to men until you bring it to a state where you are a servant, but a spiritual servant, rather than being a material servant to men. You will be in chains, whether they be physical or invisible, until you change the mindset, until you transform the tree of the knowledge of good and evil into the tree of life. And that does not mean that life doesn't exist in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It means that life, transforming into a tree of the life, means that you are bringing it to a place where it recognizes who it is, because it is life as well, but it doesn't know it because it does not know how to function as such. And you were brought into this earth to do that. It is no different than being brought into a country to train a nation on how to form. The difference is you are to teach a group of people globally of how to think differently, how to embrace the reality of who they are, how to become less brutal and more compassionate, how to know what empathy is, to feel it within their souls, as opposed to having no feeling for anyone except themselves. This is foreign to you, Kush, and you must never embrace it. To embrace it will make you as they are, and your children will kill each other, and your children will not know the way unless you show them the way. They will take on the habits of those who are dysfunctional, because that is the dominant attitude in the earth. And the whole reason of the dysfunctionality is greed. And your children will become greedy. And they will not love each other. They will not embrace each other. As a matter of fact, they will rebel against each other. It is up to you, Kush, to make sure that you work on yourself. And the energy coming from you is the energy that will change the world. And in doing so, it will change the direction of your children, and they will cease being pawns in a game of destruction. They will cease being targets for everything that is evil. And you will see that the least amount of people in the earth are the people who are dysfunctional. And until you rid the earth of that dysfunctionality, it will infect everyone in the earth. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Hawaiian, it will infect the Russian, it will affect everybody until you bring healing to it. You are the balm in Gideon. You are the doctor who must heal itself. That's who you are. And the self that you must heal is dysfunctionality. That's how I see it. Any questions or comments about that?
Good morning, everyone. Reb, I don't have so much a question or comment about what you just stated. Yet early on, and when you were speaking, you were talking about a midwife. And I knew of a midwife. My Aunt Shane was a midwife. And when people would say, hey, Shane midwife me, they would say it with a great deal of respect and admiration. And I would see my Aunt Shane. I would get paid $600 for working the summer on the farm. And there were some people that got paid weekly, $600. And she didn't give $600 to some people. She would give them $100 and give $500 to their wife. When I took an interest in hunting, he told my daddy, little George will not be with Rosie. He gonna be with Junior. Junior curse. Rosie don't curse. Yet she wasn't saying anything bad about Rosie because that was her son. What was the energy of the midwife? Or do you know of a midwife in Union? How did they gain that knowledge of how to turn a baby upside down without MUSC on their resume? What made them so special is what I'm asking.
I understand, George. First of all, I and my siblings were delivered by midwife. The reason midwifery was so prevalent, especially in the African community, is because we were not allowed to go into hospitals and doctors would not treat us. We did it ourselves. As a matter of fact, there wouldn't be a doctor if it had not been for us because we trained them. Now, as far as delivering children are concerned, the African have been delivering children forever and a day. Example, when the African was in Africa, they delivered babies. When they came across on the ship, they did the same thing. When they were in slave cabins, they did the same thing. They delivered all the babies. There were no doctors to deliver babies in the slave quarters. So it was a skill that was brought from Africa, period. And how they learned that is no different than how we are learning now. They were shown how to do it because they were in touch with who they were. As they move further away from their spiritual nature, it did not change the things that they learned spiritually that they were doing physically. The respect for midwife is because the midwife gave life, brought life into the earth, as did the first female in the world, in this world rather, brought life into the earth from that womb. That was the respect of it. The other part of it is that the midwife did not use aesthetic medications to bring children into this earth, and they didn't need it because they knew what they were doing. And you mentioned MUSC. MUSC is the place where gynecology was born, where they experimented on enslaved women without anesthesia, removing the uterus, suturing them, practicing on doing cesarean deliveries, all of that at USC. And that was white men practicing on live enslaved females. And it moved to New York, where the doctor who started it moved to New York. And the first successful cesarean delivery was by Horatio Storer. If he had the first successive delivery, how many women did he practice on who died before he got to that place of success? So that's what I understand about midwifery. I hope that helps.
Well, thank you, Reverend Richard. And in conclusion, Ma Shane, he knew the midwife who midwifed George Stanley Jr. And George Stanley Jr. is the youngest person ever to be electrocuted in the state of South Carolina. I think it was in 1944 or 1947. He was 13 or 14 years old. And she also knew the midwife of the two Caucasian girls that they said George Stanley murdered. And that's it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, George. No questions, no comments? Okay. I suppose we are done for today anyway. I do believe that we must stay on top of everything that's going on. I admonish you to keep your eye on what's happening with this Roe versus Wade thing, the overturning of it. I want not necessarily listen at it every single day because it's frustrating. But when keep your eye on the journey that it's going to take, and begin to see how women began to organize, and how solid women began to vote. The fear right now of Republican white men is that their women are going to do what they did with Obama. They were for Romney, but they voted for Obama twice. And let's see what happens this time. All of those women who were elected in 2018, that was women, Republican and independent women, casting a vote for them. The thing that changes a nation, the thing that changes a nation is when the women of the nation changes. When their attitude shifts, the nation's attitude shifts. It is no coincidence that the largest voting bloc in this nation is female, and the most active voting bloc in this nation are black females. And the way that if ever the African female and the Caucasian suburban female unite, the country will be controlled. And I know that's a strong word, but it will be controlled by feminine energy again. Or not again, but by feminine energy, period. The reason that the Caucasian nations are so messed up is because they have male leadership. If we go back and look at all of the nations prior to the onslaught of Europeans, you will find that the majority of them were under the leadership of females. As a matter of fact, most of the leadership of the Kushite kingdom were female. The same thing in other indigenous nations until the onslaught of Europeans. And they quickly changed all of that. Even with the Buddha, that should not be a male, it should be a female. Because the Buddha that was held in high esteem was the womb that brought Buddha into the earth. So it was the mother who was revered for having birthed the Buddha. Those are the things that we overlook or have not been taught. So I say again, keep an eye on the movement of females in this nation. In order to get the white female to do what she needs to do, she has to be hurt. She has to be put in a position where she is demeaned. And one of the things that's most demeaning is to tell her you have no control over your body. Now, in conclusion, unless there are questions or comments, of course, if you look at the world in terms of abortions, you will find that the first known abortions were in Egypt. And there were no issues about it at all until Caucasians got involved. And then it was about money. The first time they got involved was about money. Had nothing to do with God. Dr. Storer said that doctors should be making the money, not the midwives, because we are professionally trained. Money. And it was only transposed into a religious setting with Jerry Falwell. Questions, comments? No questions, no comments? I hope your questions have been answered. Go ahead.
My only comment is, I think by having this discussion, we change the fundamental principle of change will be grounded in truth and desire to do what is right and not money. So not only will it change, but the foundation of it will be stronger. And listening to what you're saying, and as we uproot this cancerous attitude in the nation, so will it be that we can put something down that is stronger and built on the roots of truth. So I'm glad for the discussion as well, and because that just sums everything up to me, everything that we've talked about for quite a while now.
Thank you,
This
sir.
is Barbara.
Huh?
I apologize. I am getting on late today. But you've already talked about the issues with the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch of government all aligning together and being exposed together for the cancer that's within all of those entities, correct?
Yes.
We've already talked about the legislature. We've already talked about the executive branch, and now through this issue with abortion, as well as the relaxing of the gun carrying laws, et cetera, among other things. It's like all three of those branches of the pillars of this government, the corruption within has been exposed at the same time. So if any one leg on a three-pronged stool fails, the stool falls. But it looks like all three at the same time, in terms of our awareness anyway. have occurred at the same time. So anyway, just think about that.
That makes sense. Honestly, the last one to talk about was the Supreme Court, because we discussed Mitch McConnell and how the Republicans control Congress, and we had talked about also how Biden was wishy-washy, and here we are now exposed to the Supreme Court. And keep in mind that the Republicans had to get a Republican woman in place before they could do this. She was there to birth this overturning of Roe versus Wade. So feminine energy is involved in everything, one way or the other. And first of all, is there anything else you want to add, Barbara, or anyone else?
No, I was just talking about Trump as well as Biden, but particularly the executive branch.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in the executive branch, you see both energies, and both energies do the same thing, just in a different way. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. The attitude of the Republicans today was the attitude of the Democrats in the past, and all of it is still the same way. Pre-slavery, during slavery, after slavery. No change. I want to say this before I go run. You used me as an example, and I was thinking about that. That is one of the reasons nothing works out. For example, we are having a problem putting together the documentary, or getting together rather, to do the documentary for Federal City College. And I was paid to lead the effort. And we have a documentarian to do it, but actually putting it together has proven to be challenging. The guys who call in reference to the national politics, national politics, and my position on things, they don't call like that anymore. So you're right. I began to see that there has been a major transition in the last 25 years of my life, and I hope that you guys are able to look into the mirror of time and see where you were and are now. At some point, you have to shed the robe of religiosity, and at some point, you have to get off of the road of vacillation and move on a steadfast journey towards peace and tranquility. If there are no more questions and comments, I'm done.
I did want to comment just on a couple things that right there. And I understand earlier today, can't remember if it was Ron or someone else, but they inadvertently, I know it wasn't on purpose, when mentioning your past and the things that you were involved in. And I think you might have said selfish, but my point is that no matter what is done and we see from people, and even looking at our past, not necessarily caring or holding different positions or viewing different things, the most important thing, no matter where anyone is in any particular moment, is not what is so important. What is very important is to continue to grow and develop in a sense. No one is stagnant. We're not fixed in place unless we ourselves individually decide to stay fixed in a place. But that is also the same case as a collective as well when we talk about the laws and the things that are going on in the country and the world. The reason why you find it doesn't seem like things are materializing for Federal City College is because you don't feel as passionate about it as you did before, and you hold those different views and it's just not that important. And before you even lift a finger to do it, in terms of the energy that idea derives from you internally, is very low. And that's what I mean by the motivation. Not to get off track at all, but when we think about the things that we energize in terms of creating and producing our life, no matter what it may be, it is those things that we feel strongly alive about when our senses and our inner bodies, in a sense, feel extremely energized about that particular thing. No matter what that emotion is, that is what is powering what it is that we are creating. So I wanted to say that's why that hasn't necessarily taken place. All that well, before I go on to one other thing, are there any questions or comments about that, what I just said?
You don't know me like that.
Say it again.
So you don't know me like that.
You're right. You will attest to that too. But I would definitely say before I move on that you are definitely not like at fault. And I know that's not what Ron meant, but I'm not saying this for Ron. I'm saying this for anyone else who might have been listening who misinterpreted. That was simply a part of your growth to get to where you are now. It is like I said, is a growing situation. So for all of us, for anyone who is developing as they should, this is a normal thing. And we should be able to look back at things and not hold that same stance or feel the same way about them. If it's been a long deal of time that has transpired and we are in the same place, then we simply have not been growing. In terms of, I would say, the outcry or the not being happy about Roe v. Wade being turned over just now, from a collective standpoint, this is one, I believe, well, I know of many things that have transpired recently where the collective has started to come face to face with these different beliefs and things that they have held on strongly to for a very, very long time. Because though it is those people in power who, may manipulate the system and things like that, they are only able to do that because, in a sense, even if it's through trickery, able to get the permission of the masses in order to do so, by them saying that this is okay or we agree with these particular things. As as Ron mentioned, in terms of the inception of this country, all of those spiritual or psychological beliefs by the people, the condition of their heart, who actually form this country, that in a sense has been baked in and living in this country, powering this country below the surface, in a sense, since the very beginning. Those certain ideas and ideology. Many people have embraced them, but not necessarily knowing why they were embracing them. And now coming face to face to have to challenge those beliefs and deciding this is not what I like and I want to change it. The idea of pull yourself up, for example, by your bootstrap, whereas the people were some people were fooled in believing you're strong, this is what you're supposed to be able to do, while at the same time, they were just being taken advantage of. The idea of a welfare state, and I think Nick mentioned something about this yesterday when we were talking about, last week, about capitalism and wage and being made to feel bad by just getting what it is that you're worth. this idea of a welfare state, for example, businesses, those same people who run businesses will make those who do not have much to feel bad about getting some type of aid or help from the government, which they pay in from the taxes, or you're sorry, you're not good, you're not that, you should be able to pull yourself by your bootstraps to hold your own, while at the same time drawing all of the money from the from the government out of tax bailouts and the likes, or some type of startup government grants and things like that, just more so trickery. Going back to Uvalde, Texas, the idea of, and of course, what many I guess Black people have known for a very long time, because they were more so the ones who being oppressed back ever since people were being enslaved. Oh, we don't like the idea of the police force. Our eyes are open now, and we're seeing that this thing that they were supposed to be doing for us all this time, protecting us, is not necessarily the case. So with all of these things, I want to say that essentially happening is opening up people's eyes, number one. And then number two, making them have to then face these beliefs that they took for granted before, to actually decide whether or not, they're not deciding, they're coming face to face in themselves. I don't want to say they have to decide, but they're coming face to face with underlying beliefs that they didn't pay much attention to, and then deciding whether or not they want to continue to have that belief, or changing that belief, which automatically change their lives and the way that they operate in this world, because it's those hidden beliefs that drives all of our behaviors, drives all our actions, drives how we interact and see the world. I'm finished. I said a lot. Any thoughts or questions?
Thank you, sir. Questions, comments, please?
Yeah, thank you, Sheldon. I just wanted to ask, is anybody else wondering about the sort of spiritual implications, or what's going on spiritually with the whole sort of physical act and issue of abortion itself? Because we have talked about the sort of reasons to maintain control behind the decisions that all these rich white men are making. But in terms of what's going on spiritually, metaphysically, I'm wondering if anybody else is wondering about that.
Yes, explain.
Please do.
So this comes from just my own understanding from books that I've read that I believe are correct as a result of extrapolating from my own experience, and just a variety of things that I've accumulated over the years. But there's a reason that Jewish law permits abortion. And anytime anybody says that abortion is evil, I mean, it's certainly not a good thing in the sense of it being a fun thing, but it's obviously a necessary thing, and therefore must be permitted. But anytime any one of these people who are just sort of ignorantly holding on to their own idea of what should be gives you that reason that abortion is, abortion should be outlawed, just bring up that fact. Then why is abortion permitted under a variety of circumstances in Jewish law? The people who wrote the book, you say you're basing your reasoning on. But spiritually speaking, the fetus has no independent life from the mother until an animating force, a spirit, inhabits that body. And a spirit may choose to inhabit that body at any point during pregnancy. So it's not necessarily that life begins or does not begin at conception. It begins when the life enters that body, in the sense that that body is now able to live independently. And that may happen at any point from conception to after physical birth. So the act physically of abortion is not necessarily one that is terminating a life by any means, especially in the earlier stages where it's less likely that a sort of spirit has chosen to inhabit that body. Any comments or questions so far?
So, I think we talked about that once before, some time ago.
I think we must have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we talked about the fact that the a baby's not separate from the mother until they take their first breath.
Right, and that's when life begins for that fetus.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm under the same belief as Nick in that regard. I guess I have never verbally spoken about it, but to even go further, which is a difficult conversation to have, to say, I guess, with people, because it has to be a much broader underlying understanding, I guess, for this to be readily accepted. But even in the terms of, as Nick said, that soul determines to enter that body at different points, sometimes sooner than later, and then sometimes holding off very longer. That also typically has an impact on, I guess, one, how that soul wants to live in this physical reality, whether it is, how should I say this? Really loves physical reality to the point where it lives solely there, or is kind of still connected to other realms in a sense where it does it more from a duality standpoint. And the soul can also decide and change its mind that it does not want to actually enter into the earth, which is why we end up having things like stillbirths and things of that nature. But what the point that I was making when I first started off is was I guess I don't want to say an odd conversation, but a not quite so talked about conversation, in the sense that when Nick said this is not necessarily bad, but bad in the terms of it's not a great situation to have to go through, even if abortion takes place and that soul was already in that body, that soul is not annihilated. That soul simply has opportunity. In a sense, it goes back to a state before it entered the body, and then it can just enter that same body or another body again, some point well in the future. But it's not actually that. It's not a death in the sense that we think of it as a death. Oh, it's commonly thought of it as death.
Right.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
I'm a little intrigued by this. The soul entering at various times. That's interesting to me. We have no idea then what determines when a soul enters, do we? Or what may motivate it to enter at one time versus another?
John, I see that if the baby, the fetus, doesn't become a baby until it's born, because it's dependent on the life of the mother. So it doesn't have life itself. That's what, and if the mother dies, so does the fetus, which means that it didn't have life. It was utilizing the life of the mom. The mom is keeping it alive.
Yes, sir. I see it from that perspective. I just that just intrigued me. I never thought about it that
But
way, and I'm.
That's from. However,
I guess yeah.
However, if the soul chooses to enter that body, it doesn't matter. The mama can die, and that fetus will live. There have been cases, numerous of cases, where mom got shot, and the baby stayed in the incubator for weeks, if not months at a time. So why did that child not die? Because it was chosen to be in this earth. There are times when that happens. However, the determination of that is not up to us. It's up to the Creator. The determination that we have to engage with is that life, that fetus lives after it inhales the breath of this earth, after it exits the womb. What happens within that womb is in the hands of the Creator, because we don't have a choice as to when it's going to breathe or not, or whether it's going to live or not if its host dies. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense. Makes sense.
One last thing, real quick. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Nothing. I'm just. It just kind of hit me when Nick said that, because I think of X amount of things happen at week 1, at week 2, at this trimester, at that trimester, and when he said that at various times, so wow, that's amazing to me. It just talks about, you know, the amazing part of the individuality of each birth and the power of Elohim. That just, I never thought about it that way. That soul enters each fetus when it is time to enter that fetus, not because things automatically happen at certain. I hope I'm not sounding confusing at all, but it just kind of got my attention. That's all.
No, I guess to elaborate on what you're saying a little bit. So it's the soul itself that decides when it wants to enter that physical body. Number one, and number two, all of the stuff that we're thinking about in terms of trimesters and dates and things like that, that is solely based upon things that we can measure, but measure from, of course, a physical standpoint. The whole idea of a lot of things that we do and observe as a collective does not take into account spirituality in a sense. Is literally everything that we can prove with some type of physical measurement. If our society, in a sense, if it cannot say that this is whatever we're observing, if it cannot be explained through science, or so to speak, in most cases, we kind of ignore it. We just focus on what we can measure, and essentially, when I say measure, that's based upon the 5 senses.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, that's. I guess you would say that how science is used is based upon the 5 senses.
Yeah, this is Richard. Yeah, Sheldon. Yeah, I mean, science. Why is there science? To give some guidance and I think, in a positive sense, some structure to what otherwise could be a very confused, call it earthly experience. So that's its contribution. It's by no means the ultimate authority, but it's pushing in the direction. And also science, remember, is expanding its comprehension. So you sort of have I think, science pushing towards spirit may be welcoming the aspects of science that are broader and broader and give to greater sense of understanding of the unity of it all. But actually, I want to go back to Nick. What Nick said, what went through my mind after Nick spoke was, so why birth? We talk a lot about death and all that and being in this earthly experience, but what's birth? What's going on there and why? And all that end of it, I think we don't talk about very much, or we think we know a lot about, and we just make assumptions and move ahead on. But I don't know, it just comes into my mind to reflect on the spiritual basis for that. And then, of course, if you're looking at it with that in perspective, or some perspective of that nature in mind, you can then connect that to some extent with the fact that the spiritual presence within that fetus is there for a short period of time, or there and will be there for a long period of time. All that end of it coming into life, if you want, through the what we call the birth experience. I think that would be, to me, a pretty interesting discussion.
Yeah, and thank you. From what you were saying, Dad, what is a distinct question that you are wondering about? If any.
Well, I'm an old man and I ramble. I don't have a distinct question. It's a perspective, call it a dimension or an aspect of the discussion to make it more whole, right? If you want to think of it as a side, birth is one side, death is the other. It's just sort of looking at the other side, the coming into this earthly experience. Then there's the middle passage, which is the spirit deciding to maintain the relationship or the connection, or the spirit leaving for whatever purpose, whatever reason, that I think we understand very little. We grapple with in a scientific way because that's all we've got. But remember, if this is all in the context of nothing is destroyed, then I'm just saying, so then what is really creation in that sense, I guess? Anyway, I don't know. It's just
so
when it was going through my mind, and I thought it was just an interesting, to me, sort of fascinating aspect that I don't know that we try to include in this kind of discussion, but maybe should.
It is very interesting, and I think it definitely helps with the getting a sense of spiritual closure on some level as to the understanding of what this all really is. I was just reading a pretty good book on this process by, if anyone has heard of Dolores Cannon. I just came across her like a few weeks ago, but she's good. She is, she's already passed. I think she transitioned in like, it might not have been too long ago, but anyway, she did a lot of hypnotherapy, and she found that she could bring people to such a deep place, such that they were not in one place in time, and she could speak to them in other points in their incarnation physically, or their incarnation in spiritual realms. So you can speak to somebody across that entire length of time. And so she asked a bunch of questions that I found very interesting. And I do think both she and her book series are quite good. And that one specifically is, I just read this book. It's Between Death and Life, I believe, by Dolores Cannon. But one of the primary reasons we come here in the first place to this physical experience is to do exactly that, to experience what is possible here that is not possible in other sort of more lofty realms of reality. This is a very difficult, essentially, tool that we impose onto ourselves because we ultimately know its purpose and that it is for our ultimate growth and ultimate experience of the true nature of what it means to be a piece of the Creator. And the birth process is part of that experience. So part of what I said was the spirit could choose to enter that body at any point, depending on what kind of experience that spirit, a person wants to have. You can fully go through the trauma of physical birth. It is kind of traumatic. Or you can sort of skip that part and enter after it's finished. And at some point you go get traumatized, but that's just the nature of life, and also the nature of what you came here to experience on some level. And we could go into that exactly some more, but entering this physical experience is no more difficult or easy than leaving this physical experience. And as Lao Tzu, however you pronounce that, Lao Tzu, the Chinese sage, said, life and death are the same thread viewed from opposite sides. It is no more difficult to enter than it is to exit. And while you're a baby, your ability to leave the body and sort of return to the realms from whence you came is much better than when you get older, because we accumulate all these layers of things grabbing our attention and making us turn our focus towards this physical experience to the point where we forget. And I know we've spoken about in Foundation before, the forgetting part of coming into this experience is something that is quite shocking, I think, every time it happens. And the reason that we forget, and this means to not remember most of the details of our experience in spiritual planes before coming here, is because you can't play the game if you know that it's a game. The purpose is to engage with an experience genuinely and make a decision about how you respond to it genuinely. And if you know, like Sheldon said, that you can't die, you know ultimately at the whole time you're in the game that your existence is essentially infinite. Like, it just changes form, and there are different experiences within it. If you know this, then there is a certain thing, a certain element removed from the game, so to speak, that it makes it more difficult to gain the kind of experience you need in order to grow as quickly as you can. So it's a little bit like we engage this difficult experience of being present in this sort of material physical realm. And we can't know that it's an illusion, essentially, because what we need from that experience is that difficulty. And that's sort of generally what happens in the beginning. We can, of course, learn how to remember, but it is only after going through some aspect of that difficulty. And it is through learning more about yourself and doing things you didn't think you could do that were possible for you, that your sense of self expands, that your knowledge of self grows. And that is the point for being here at all. And just like Sheldon said, some spirits, when they have the sort of final opportunity to enter that body or not, to jump into deep end or not, they say, no, this is too much. Although at that point, I would imagine if you are refusing to enter and all this work has been done to prepare a spot for you, you might get some let's say, a light talking to when you return to where you came from. Or maybe somebody else takes your place. But anyway, I say all that to say that this religious thinking has done so much to dull the true amazing nature of what this is and what we are going through and experiencing. And it's confusing and difficult on purpose. It's confusing and difficult, and we feel like we can't know it all, and we feel cut off, etc. All that is on purpose. And all that is part of what we understood in some sense intellectually before we got here, but you can't really know what that's like until you experience it, until you forget, until you exit the womb and you start crying because, oh my God, what did I do? On some level, you remember that this is not where you come from, but you can't really remember what it was like while you are fully engaged with this physical experience, and that is somewhat traumatic, as you can imagine. Anyway, I just wanted to add that because I think it's related to this discussion on abortion and what it means to do that. Oh, and I also wanted to add, actually, extrapolating from also what Sheldon said, the idea that you cannot destroy life in terms of physically ending it, etc. Extrapolating from this idea of abortion all the way up to something like murder, it's nevertheless correct. And I'm sure we probably have spoken about that and know that by now in our group. But when you murder someone, you do not destroy their life or their spirit or whatever. The reason that that carries so much negativity is essentially by the time that happens, there is so much karmic entanglement and so many other points of experience that that person has that connects to other people and their experience, that when you murder someone, it creates it's like throwing a stone into a pond and every ripple is pain. And in that sense, it has a much greater negative repercussion, both for yourself and for everybody else who has to, well, both for you if you did the murder in terms of what you are now responsible for, and also for everybody else who is experiencing the fallout of that. And in that sense, it's a whole different degree of a thing than to kill the fetus, which is what is happening during abortion. So there's many ways in which these things are playing out physically, spiritually, and metaphysically, and they all have different impacts on our experience. And as I said before, as evidence of the fact that the abortion issue has nothing to do with what the Bible does or does not say, but instead everything to do with what essentially rich religious white men want to impose upon everything that is not them, is that Jewish law permits abortion. So anyway, I am done. Thank you.
No, thank you. appreciate that. Unless there are comments or questions, I think we are probably at a stopping point, and we can pick up tomorrow and continue. I want us to stop at a place where we can mull over what's been said, has been said rather, and because a lot has been said, and it's all pertinent, not only to the question of abortion, but to everything that we are encountering at this point in our lives. And I also believe it's pertinent to change itself. So unless there are questions or comments at this moment, we will end the discussion. Questions or comments? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All of you for being on this line and contributing with your energy, questions, and comments. We will see you tomorrow at 11. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a great day.